There is a city in the desert where it rains less than 5 inches a year, and nearly 2 million people wake up every morning expecting water to pour from the wall. That water does not come from local rain. It does not come from a nearby river. It does not come from nature at all. It comes from promises. Promises made decades ago, written during unusually wet years, based on numbers that assumed the future would always look like the past. Today, those promises are breaking. Reservoirs are shrinking. Rivers are running dry before they reach the sea. And the system that built the modern American West is quietly unraveling. This is not just a story about drought. It is not only about climate. It is a story about how an entire region was built on water it never truly had. This is the story of how America borrowed rivers and what happens when the debt comes due. The American West has always been dry. Not occasionally, not unusually, dry by default. Long before highways and cities, before dams and canals, the land made its limits clear. Rain arrived briefly and then disappeared. Rivers surged with snowmelt and then shrank back into the earth. Drought was not an emergency, it was normal. Indigenous communities understood this reality. They followed water instead of trying to command it. They planted where rivers allowed. They moved when the land demanded it. Their survival depended on understanding limits, not denying them. Then, in the 19th century, the United States arrived with a different philosophy. The West was not something to adapt to, it was something to conquer. As settlers pushed westward, optimism raced ahead of geography. Railroads advertised fertile land. Government pamphlets promised abundance. Promoters insisted that the climate itself would change once farming began. They had a phrase for it: rain follows the plow. The idea was comforting. It felt scientific. It felt inevitable. And it was completely false. For a brief period, settlers were fooled by luck. The late 19th century happened to be wetter than average. Crops grew, towns formed, families stayed. Then the weather corrected itself. Rain stopped coming. Fields dried out. Wind lifted topsoil into the sky. Farms failed. Livestock died. Entire towns vanished. The land had not betrayed anyone. It had done exactly what it had always done. Faced with this truth, America had a choice. It could accept the limits of the West and adapt to them, or it could try to overpower them. America chose power. If rain would not come to the West, then water would be dragged there instead. Rivers became the solution. Not local rivers, but distant ones. Rivers that flowed hundreds of miles away. Rivers that belonged to other landscapes entirely. No river mattered more than the Colorado. To early planners, the Colorado looked massive and unstoppable. It carved the Grand Canyon. It fed valleys and wetlands. It seemed endless. What they did not realize was that they were measuring it during one of the wettest periods in centuries. Using those numbers, states sat down and divided the river on paper. They allocated water rights that exceeded what the river could reliably provide. Everyone agreed. Everyone signed. On paper, it worked perfectly, because paper does not dry out. Then came the age of concrete. The early 20th century was defined by engineering confidence. There was a belief that any natural system could be controlled, redirected, improved. Rivers would no longer flood unpredictably. They would flow on command. Dams rose in places that once felt untouchable. Canyon walls were sealed with concrete. Valleys were flooded deliberately. Reservoirs formed where deserts once burned. These structures were celebrated as triumphs of human ingenuity. They produced power. They stored water. They promised security. For the first time, the West felt permanent. Cities expanded rapidly. Los Angeles pulled water from distant mountains. Phoenix grew far beyond what local rainfall could support. Las Vegas rose from the desert not beside a river, but hundreds of miles from one. Water became invisible. When something arrives through pipes, quietly and consistently, it stops feeling limited. It stops feeling valuable. It becomes assumed. Lawns turned green where rain rarely fell. Golf courses spread across desert valleys. Suburbs expanded outward in every direction. Agriculture scaled up dramatically. the Central Valley became one of the most productive farming regions on Earth, growing crops that required enormous amounts of water in an environment that naturally offered very little. Aquifers were drilled deeper, rivers were stretched thinner. Still, the system worked, so no one stopped. Every year, more people arrived. Every year, more water was promised. Every year, consumption increased. The bill was growing, but the envelope stayed sealed. There was no single moment when the system failed. No dramatic collapse, no sudden disaster, just measurements. Snowpack in the mountains grew thinner. Reservoir levels slipped lower each year. Rivers reached the sea less often. Lake Mead developed a white ring along its edges, marking where water used to be. Hydropower production slowed. Farmers began leaving fields unplanted. Cities introduced conservation rules quietly, hoping small changes would be enough. But conservation could not fix a system built on excess. The math no longer worked. Agreements written a century earlier no longer made sense. States began to argue. Cities sued farmers. Farmers blamed cities. Everyone defended their share. Tribal nations, many of who were promised water first, often still waited to receive it. Scarcity turned water into a weapon. Every decision became a trade-off. Drinking water versus food production. Ecosystems versus economies. Growth versus survival. There were no perfect answers, only choices about who would lose first. Some places began to confront an uncomfortable reality. They may not be sustainable at their current size. Not without major changes. Not without giving something up. The American West was never meant to be lush. It was meant to be respected. For more than a century, respect was replaced with control. Limits were replaced with ambition. Reality was replaced with belief. The water did not disappear overnight. It was promised too many times, used too freely, assumed to be endless. Now the land is reminding us of something ancient and unavoidable. Nature always collects its debts. The future of the West will not be decided by dams or canals alone. It will be decided by whether people can accept limits or continue pretending they do not exist. Rivers can be borrowed, but they can never be owned.
Be a stranger than you think. From forgotten battles to bizarre inventions, we uncover the stories that make you say, "What the history?"